Hello humans, good morning, and thank you for joining me on another episode of the Cartridge and Disc Podcast. This is your Gen X Gamer here, and today let's talk about the 6th generation of video games. That's right, guys, thank you for joining me on these morning commutes. It really does make the ride a lot more pleasant. It's going to be an hour and a half of fun in traffic, but we're going to turn that into a positive by discussing a subject that hopefully is interesting to you as much as it is to me. And let me tell you, the 6th generation is quite unique in video gaming for many reasons. A lot of people consider it the greatest video game generation of all. And to me, it's the most creative video game generation of all. Now, why do I say that and why that made it so? Well, first of all, think of all the titles that are really expensive right now. The bulk of them come from this generation here. There's so many titles in this generation that are super expensive now. But more than anything, the saying that competition drives ingenuity and creativity is well represented here by what happened in this generation. In this generation, you had four players rather than the usual 2 or 3, and everything was in chaos. PlayStation was really the catalyst for a lot of this change. They knocked off Nintendo as the supreme leader of video game entertainment. They really did, with the PlayStation. And that's all thanks to Nintendo fumbling the bag and double-crossing Sony by going with Philips at the last minute. And you know the story, how it goes from there. We never got our beloved Nintendo PlayStation. Well, regardless, what happened here is you had 4 competing houses. You had Nintendo fighting for its life with the GameCube. You had the Dreamcast, the swan song of the Sega company as far as hardware. You had the best-selling video game system of all time, the PlayStation 2, and you had the newcomer, of course, the Xbox. Guys, and what that did, all that competition did, is it greenlit so many projects that wouldn't have been greenlit in today's market, for example, or in any other market when you had fewer players. If you go back to these times and you look at these libraries and just the plethora of games that you had as far as diversity of styles, you hadn't seen that since the console wars. And it really showed in the titles that were being put out. JRPGs were becoming more imaginative. The quality of the work was better. The range of titles that we got across the board was just amazing, and we had the beginnings of what was going to be online gaming. But these companies really, all of them, except for PlayStation, were fighting for their lives. And this is the importance of Sony entering the market and disrupting it, basically, and forcing these other companies to take on extra challenges, to go the extra mile, to give creators a more open forum for ideas of just putting anything out there. They just want to have a hit on their console. Now, Nintendo learned that, yes, they can, bank on their IPs, but that wasn't going to make them number one automatically. Sega had learned all the lessons of hardware by this time, and they put everything they had learned, and mostly was not listening to their audience, and then mostly they put that in the Dreamcast. And last but not least, you had Microsoft, that one way or another they were going to spend their way into relevance. Right? Whatever it took, whatever amount of money it was going to take for them to get a foothold in the video game industry, they were going to do it, and that continues to be their mantra to this day. Can you imagine that? They're still in the same position. That's what fumbling the bag looks like. And that happened to Nintendo, that happened to Sega, and that happened to eventually Microsoft. It's very hard to maintain the #1 slot. You do it through quality, you do it through titles. But if it wasn't for this era right here, if it wasn't for this stage in the video game industry, a lot of the advancements, a lot of the titles, a lot of what we remember fondly from all this time period wouldn't even be a factor today. It all had to do with these companies pushing and pushing for innovation, pushing for new titles, pushing for something different. I mean, these are all things that do not occur today. We have uniformity across the board, uniformity of purpose. In very few areas do you see companies taking chances in order to create something new, in order to create something innovative, in order to create something that changes the game. Basically, it's too risky. But back then, when everybody was fighting for survival, when 3 of the companies were literally fighting to stay relevant, fighting to stay afloat, fighting to stay in business, back then we saw all this innovation, man. And I was so taken back, you know, looking back at all these titles, looking back at my collection, looking back at what's on my shelves, and without even looking at the games, just looking at the cover art, just looking at the side notes and looking what type of game it was, how many people were involved, the diversity of studios, the diversity of programmers that were given work at this time was amazing. It was amazing. It was a different time in video games. It was a time for the creators. It was a time where a lot of these programmers were more valued than they are today. They were back then treated as artists. There was a lot more value in you know, the work that these people did, and the way they were seen by the public, and the way they were seen in industry. But those days are over. I mean, you can see how the video game industry has changed and how important a 4th player is. Now, the games have become so expensive to produce. AAA experience have become so, you know, cost prohibitive for so many wanting to start up a new company, that really isn't the way to go, right? The only way and the only place where you're seeing low-cost game development now, besides mobile, which is really a portable medium, is the independent market. But as far as getting a 4th player, as far as, you know, the dominant market, it's going to be very difficult, especially if it's a corporation. It would have to be a sole proprietorship that doesn't care about having the next Fortnite or having the next Call of Duty. You know, it's really going to take something, and I don't see it happening anytime soon. So all we can do is look back, reminisce, and enjoy at these great titles. Guys, if you want to start collecting, let me tell you, there's still a lot of great games for a decent price out there, and you can get yourself a nice little collection. I'm not going to tell you that it's going to be cheap, but it's very doable. Very doable. If you concentrate on these 4 systems, the Dreamcast, the Xbox, the PlayStation 2 specifically, you can really get you know, just a plethora of games in different categories that will really take you back. The GameCube is expensive as hell. Let me tell you, if you didn't get in early on the GameCube, you're gonna have to wait for somebody to sell their collection, and hopefully you can get a 20 to 30% discount by buying it whole, because starting a GameCube collection nowadays is only for the rich. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. I'm going to have another video today later on. I hope you join me. Go ahead and hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't done so. And guys, for those of you who are members, I have a very important update video today. I had one yesterday, another one today, and it's going to be a very informative week. All right, guys, I will catch you on the next one. Take care.